Jaguar, a British auto manufacturer that you have to wonder if they'll be still making British autos here in a few years, at least ones that people buy. Jaguar's been a little bit late to the game with trying to revitalize their brand, and what's even more disconcerting is the fact that, well, the Telegraph points it out quite clearly, and that's the fact that Jaguar was not only late to the game of trying to save its car company, but Jaguar may have been late to the game when it came to realizing that woke and DEI is very passé. The DEI cult is now imploding, and Jaguar is just the first casualty.
Renegade Online.
The DEI cult is now imploding. Jaguar is just the first casualty. The point of inclusive policies was not to do the right thing, but to be profitable. This from the Telegraph, published just a few days ago. Generally speaking, there's two approaches to business. The first is to follow the maxim, the customer is always right. Listen to the market and sell things that people want to buy. The alternative, bolder prospectus, followed by Italian waiters and a range of Western companies, is to adopt the idea that the customer is completely wrong and needs to be better educated about coffee and social justice, respectively.
What a line.
That's what I'm saying. The opening to this article, when I saw this over the weekend, I saw enough in that first paragraph where I was like, yes. It's like, this could be a lot of fun. Jaguar launched its new advertising campaign to a resounding chorus of disdain. After having a diverse set of models prowl around in bright clothing, nothing so passé as a vehicle involved at all, to slogans including "Create Exuberant," the company was roundly mocked on social media. Its response was to double down and insist that any criticism was, quote, vile hatred and intolerance. And of course, this was the guy who runs Jaguar was saying this. Vile hatred and intolerance. Again, finger wagging in the face of the customer, because this has worked so damn well for Hollywood and leftist news media and stuff like this for so long. Oh, wait, it hasn't.
This doesn't work for Netflix shows. Why do they think that it would work with a luxury vehicle brand?
And Netflix is not perfect, but they have certainly changed their tune quite a bit since that didn't work.
Oh, no. Of course they haven't. Sorry. Yeah. The shows like Cuties or and I won't go through the entire list of shows that are on Netflix, or the fact that they do these constant recastings. For everything that we give Disney garbage for, Netflix is there to, they have a Black Cleopatra documentary that they unironically put out into the world.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And still, it's not successful. So the idea that you would take a luxury car brand and try to turn it into, to try to be in the Tesla space from this is very fashion centered. This is, well, there's another F word that it's centered around as well.
Yes.
I genuinely do not understand why they let this guy in a mesh shirt run amok within their company.
These people couldn't sell coffee. They can't sell high heel shoes. There's nothing that makes them appealing. Nothing. Yep. And you're talking about $60,000, $70,000 purchases, and this. Well, they are your spokespeople?
It's going to be more now. They're thinking that like the minimum entry point might be six figures for this, but we'll find out tomorrow for sure. Yeah. All electric. No more gas. No more British motoring. Not in the same way. Exactly what was going through the heads of the marketing team responsible will remain forever unknown, and perhaps will turn out to have been a brilliantly executed ploy to switch the customer base for a luxury vehicle brand from middle-aged career professionals to the lucrative students and creative artists segment.
Hold on a second. Hold on. Valiant, I was not aware that there was a massive market of lucrative students and creative artists packing that kind of money to purchase those kinds of cars. I didn't realize it. Did you know this?
No. because it's entirely sarcasm in the article. I mean,
good thing.
Yeah.
Good thing.
I can't shake the feeling, however, that Jaguar has slightly let the mask eat the face. Call me a cynic, but the point of diversity, equity, and inclusion from a corporate perspective wasn't that it was the right thing to do. It was that it was meant to be profitable. And this is key. I love this part. The argument had three prongs, right? And we've talked about this ad nauseum, or at least I know I have. Businesses that have engaged in this, that have spent collectively hundreds of billions of dollars across multiple industries, okay, on engaging in this diversity, equity, and inclusion crap. The basic premise behind diversity, equity, and inclusion was this, and maybe in all good faith, this idea that if we simply do this, add this, change that, show more people that look like this, sleep with these kinds of people, identify their weenies as hoo-has and whatever else, then we'll get more people in here. We'll keep all of our same audience, and then we'll get all these groups now that aren't buying our product in addition to it. Sounds really good on paper, except, of course, it doesn't work, and it hasn't worked. And this is part of the issue here. So the idea he's going in with is the notion that, and he is correct, the author of this article is correct, that the idea was to be more profitable. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, environmental, social governance, and all this stuff was sold. The lie was sold to companies that this would make you more money. And he goes on to say, the argument that we're talking about here had three prongs. The first, as anyone who's done mandatory compliance training can attest, is that introducing certain policies and approaches serve as a firewall against expensive litigation in the event that some crazy person feels discriminated against. This part is going nowhere thanks to years of legislation. The human resource bureaucracy is firmly embedded in business practices across the West. And if anything, the focus of labor's efforts in Britain will be to expand it. The second, diversity as PR, public relations, is a little more mutable. The idea here is for companies to sell themselves as an extension of the consumer's personality, emphasizing the alignment in values as a means of extracting pounds or US dollars, or wherever you are, from wallets. By and large, this works in easily observed and explicable ways. Luxury brands market themselves as part of a luxury lifestyle. Gambling firms try to pass as part of the fun of sports rather than as parasites, enriching themselves at the expense of small, troubled minority. The issue is that when the consumer goes a bit mad, so too does the company. At the height of BLM in 2020, when Tim Cook took the chief executive of Apple, could write a letter to employees declaring that their desire for a return to normalcy was actually, quote, a sign of privilege. Jaguar's advert would have passed without comment. Landing as it did after the re-election of Donald Trump amid a general backlash against woke excess, it felt outdated from the off. Other companies have been quicker to spot the change in the wind. Walmart, valued at $665 billion or 525 British pounds, has announced that it's winding down its funding for the Center for Racial Equity. I touched on this, I think, a few days ago. Founded in 2020, prohibiting its website, the chest binders, prohibiting from its website the chest binders and books about transgenderism that third-party sellers were marketing to children, and phasing out the phrase diversity, equity, and inclusion from its corporate lexicon. Is that a lot of this is being phased out, but it's not going away. They're simply rebranding it. And like I've talked about before, much like going from global warming to climate change, we're simply going to rebrand something because it failed. So now we're going to try to keep pushing this, but under a different name.
Yeah, and it's really gross too, because what they're doing is they're taking a well-known issue of growing up, which is that around 12 or 13, more often in girls, but sometimes in boys, they'll be uncomfortable with their bodies as puberty begins, because it's something that's new and different, and everybody knows about kids who feel awkward in their bodies. And so what they're doing is they're taking that and then they're presenting it as if that's a permanent psychological situation and kids don't know better. And then they're monetizing that. Yeah. So they are literally taking those who are less able to defend themselves in an awkward position, telling them it will never change. And here, we'll fix it for vast amounts of money that you can never reverse.
And you can see here, it's not just at Jag, it's not just at Walmart. In a similar vein, Boeing is terminating its DEI department. Microsoft has laid off DEI staff. Meta and Google have cut DEI employees and programs. And the tech sector appears to be souring greatly on diversity initiatives in general. It wasn't that long ago that founders were being attacked for daring to suggest they'd hire the best person for the job. And by implication, that this might lead to a less than perfectly representative team. Explicit meritocracy is back in vogue. Now, again, this is this author's opinion, and what we don't know definitively as of right now is if, and again, I'm going to have this conversation next week with Kershaw, a little bit more detail. But what we don't know right now is whether or not this is a ruse or if this is actually beginning to go away. I think in some places it's genuinely going to go away because companies are waking up to the fact that this has been an absolute disaster. This has been an incineration of shareholder capital. It's been an incineration of cash. It's been an incineration of otherwise more appropriately investable capital that the company could have used on other things.
When you have something like this, you have this guy, which you've talked about this on your channel many times. This head of marketing for the company that comes out there in a blazer and a mesh shirt and talks about diversity, equity, inclusion, and how they're the future and their progress. And if you play this in 2020, it plays very differently than when you play it in December of 2024. Right. In December of 2024, everyone has seen where this leads. This leads to children doing things to their bodies that cannot be undone. And no one is here to say, no, let's just hear more of what they have to say. They've seen the end result of this and they found it lacking, and they found it, I'll be frank, damaging and I'll use a phrase they like, on the wrong side of history.
Yeah, indeed. And it truly is. And they're coming to this conclusion now. It's like, we tried this. We've done this experiment. We were told that the world was moving in this direction. The world, in other words, was moving hard left, is what they were being told. The point of bringing that up is that this is what absolutely illuminates stories like this, because the business world has been given this same lie, this same load of bullcrap for years. And they have finally figured out what you're waking up to now. It's not just after the election of Trump in 2024. It's also after now that they have realized the November 5th this year, whatever it was, 5th or 6th, I don't remember. Whatever election day was in 2024, 4 weeks ago, that was the day that all these companies finally figured out, you know what? That money we've been losing, no, this is legit. Trump just won in a landslide. Again, the madness of crowds has undoubtedly played a role in all of this. And at the height of the BLM mania, companies made costly commitments to placate angry customers. And once it abated, business appeared to have rode back on them. But there's also the collapse of the final rationale for diversity, performance. And let me say this, the line about here, once it abated, businesses appeared to have rode back on them. The outrage so much didn't abate as the truth came out, as it always does. And by that, I mean going back to the whole era of hands up, don't shoot, right? That was a lie. That never happened with Michael Brown. That was proven in a court of law beyond all reasonable doubt. And the witness who even stated that recanted the statement later and said that didn't happen. That's what started that movement, by and large. But the bottom line is that people found out a lot of what they were being told wasn't really the truth. So when I see once it abated, read that as the facts came out, the truth came out. The consulting giant McKinsey & Company conducted a series of studies between 2015 and 2023 trumpeting the findings that diversity made companies more profitable. It was an employer's dream. You could hire from the global market for talent, possibly at a lower price, and end up with teams that were more than the sum of their parts. And of course, we've told you all this time that probably is not going to really wind up being the case. And lo and behold, this was probably an over-extrapolation from a narrower set of conclusions about business leadership. But even so, companies took the message to heart. As Dame Vivian Hunt, McKinsey's managing partner in the UK, put it, diversity was a, quote, business imperative that was, quote, driving real business results. Too good to be true. It seemed too good to be true, and it was. As a pair of academics have argued, the measurement McKinsey chose didn't show that more diverse companies were more profitable. It showed that companies that were more profitable subsequently chose to hire more diverse candidates. Diversity in and of itself had no statistically significant relationship to profits, sales, or a host of other metrics.
And maybe you guys know more about this than I do, but McKinsey is one of those firms that has its finger in almost every single company.
Disney hired him.
Yes.
Yeah,
Many times. Yeah. So in other words, what we're finding out here, and this is what's going on at Jaguar, to bring this back home to this, is that these companies have all been led down the primrose path. They've been led down the road to hell, paved with good intentions and a lot of lies, frankly. Because the studies, again, as they clearly point out here, these studies were all based around nonsense. Saying, oh, look, IBM and Boeing have a very diverse this and that. And they're very profitable. Boeing was already there. IBM was already there. Walmart was already there. Now in 2024, when we start seeing a much better history of what we saw from 2015 to 2023, when things were just getting going, we're actually seeing the results of this. Look at Disney. Look at the crap that their studios have pumped out. And how many stories have we talked about where the veterans have been driven out, passed over for promotions, showing exactly what's going on. And this is happening at Jaguar too. This is how we wind up with this. And again, the problem with Jaguar here is that they're so late to the game in doing this. They've been planning this for probably at least a year or two, right? They didn't just decide 2 weeks ago to shut down auto production for a year as they go to all EV. They've been developing this and designing this for years. And they're just now coming late to the game. And that's what this whole article is about. The company's so stupid and so dense that they could not read the tea leaves, and they've been following the same crap advice that all these other companies have already long now figured out that doesn't work. And the companies, these other companies out there, they're now just struggling, trying to figure out how to unwind the clock. Jaguar is jumping in now like, oh, look, we're here, y'all. And everybody's already left the party. The cops are already there. Half the people, half the teenagers are already in freaking handcuffs. Jaguar's walking in now with you know, the handle of Jack after the party's been busted.
Let me give you a quick statistic on Jaguar so you know how well they're doing. Jaguar's market share in the United States since 2022 has dropped 41.5%. Jaguar already was not a major player. Worldwide, Jaguar's market share by revenue is 0.27%. So if they were a big, major auto manufacturer, this would be bad. But because they're already on the ropes, this is catastrophic.
Right.
They're not Bud Light. They're some sort of, you know, prestigious swill that they're trying to convince you to drink again. No. And they've come out with Mulvaney. Good grief.
No, this is it. They were. This was maybe some people will call this, looking, well, we had to go for the Hail Mary. Everything was so bad off. I mean, thank God they didn't do the same thing at the same time with LandRover, because then there would have been nothing left. And the shift in the public mood, or if the shift in the public mood explains the scale of the shift, it's this factor that's most likely to lead to permanent changes. Economists tend to think of companies as profit maximizing. I mean, generally, that is what they are designed to do, folks. And over a long enough time horizon, they generally are. Even if individual firms fail to adapt to changing circumstances, the ruthless process of creative destruction will tend to winnow out those unable to hold their own. as new contenders enter the market. Over the short run, however, these forces can be held at bay. As researchers at Princeton have noted, low interest rates tend to favor large and incumbent firms over small entrants. With the market power of those companies increasing as a result, it doesn't seem too great a stretch to consider the possibility that the worst excesses of the DEI industry, and here it is, were a response, and this is true, were a response to the long period of historically cheap money in the U.S. and elsewhere. And this is where the question always comes in about the BlackRock stuff and things like this. And you can throw in JP Morgan Chase in there too. When you are using environmental, social, governance stuff as measurements, which is if you go to every Fortune 500 company on Yahoo Finance, go to their individual page, look at Disney, look at Apple, look at Boeing, look at Tata Motors, who owns Jaguar. And, well, I don't think they have an ESG score necessarily because they're not traded natively in the U.S., obviously. But the point is, you can pull up any company, and there will be an ESG score there. It'll say low risk, high risk, moderate risk, but there'll be a number. And a lot of these companies out there for years, for the last 10 years especially, have been offering, hey, we'll cut another 10 basis points or maybe 25 basis points or something like. They're going to give you a little bit better loan package, a little bit cheaper loan here if your ESG scores at a certain pace, right? So this pulls into the DEI stuff. And this is part of it because it made it easy because companies could engage in the excess because you're paying some of the lowest interest rates in history, which allows these companies to expand. And you can afford the luxuries. You can afford, okay, look, we'll dive into this bull crap right now because even though we have our doubts on it, we can make the bankers happy. We can make the Wall Streeters happy. The lefties out there like the Larry Finks at BlackRock happy with this. But companies have finally realized that this just doesn't work.
I mean, this is the embodiment of that quote, the hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and then weak men create hard times.
It's cyclical, isn't it? Companies were insulated from competitive pressure and internal political games, which would usually be curbed by the need to make money, allowed to play out in full, potentially as a partial alternative to pay raises in a relatively slow growth environment. Now that borrowing is expensive again, diversity is expensive too. The PR motive has been weakened. The regulatory motive is unchanged, and the profit incentive has collapsed. As a result, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are being subjected to the scrutiny that had been held in abeyance since the financial crisis, talking about 2008. As ever, it's useful to keep things in perspective. Woke isn't dead. Human resources is going nowhere, and diversity, equity, and inclusion may make a return under another name. The political forces that gave rise to the last few years of expansion remain, and considerably so, ahead of where they were prior to 2020. But for now, the tide has receded slightly and left Jaguar stranded. And I would go so far as to say probably killed it.
I cannot wait to see what this car actually looks like, because if the car is anything like the ad, it's going to go over like a lead balloon anyways.
I mean, there was a picture of the rear of the car, and it just looks like a block. It looks ugly, frankly. And I hope that was a really bad computer rendering and not an actual picture of the car, because if that's what that trash looks like tomorrow, I'm going to laugh myself to death.
So Jaguars are already known for being very, what would you say, maintenance intensive vehicles, and expensive at that. And any electric car outside of Tesla seems to be struggling. There are a few exceptions. Rivian, for example, is doing okay. The idea that Jaguar is going to get in and do well with an electric car, I'm not sure that's a likely thing to happen. And then on top of that, you have the terrible marketing, and you just look at it and say, many different car manufacturers of old are probably getting ready to go under. And Jaguar looks to be top of the list.
And they're going to lead the way.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.